stuffed in it. The editors at Macmillan tried to make some sense out of it. They sent her galley proofs back, and she said, uh-oh, there are some scenes here having to do with the Atlanta campaign. I'm not sure that everything's right. And Dad said, well, why don't we ask Mr. Wilbur Kurtz to read it and tell you what he thinks. He read it. The official story is, he always said he never found anything. But Margaret Mitchell later confided to other people that he did find a few things, little teeny-weeny things that she changed in the book. So here, he went to Hollywood as her representative. And he created the image of Tara, which is one of the most famous, popular cultural images in American culture. It's right up there with the Coca-Cola bottle. Although Kurtz is not given credit for it. He invented our image, our understanding of Tara. Now, if I just show you the next image. When he went, this is Margaret Mitchell's ancestral home. Remember, on Margaret Mitchell's father's side, there were Methodists, Scotch-Irish Methodists. On her mother's side, there were Irish Catholics, the Fitzgeralds on the Stevens. And her great-grandfather, Philip Fitzgerald, came from Ireland, and he and his brother went in business into real estate. They owned a number of land lots. In 1860, Philip Fitzgerald owned 2 or 3 land lots, each 2.5 acres. He owned 37 slaves, and was the second wealthiest man in Fayette County. This is what their home looked like. You can see one of the side buildings on the side. There were about a dozen of these where guests stayed when they came. So Margaret Mitchell said to Kurtz, I don't want you to change my history. Make sure they present Tara just like my grandfather's house looked like. And she visited there many, many times as a girl. Because her grandmother had 2 sisters who never married. There were no boys in their social class to marry. They all had gotten killed. And they watched this house. They lived in the house into the 1930s. And so as a girl, she went there often to spend time. And so let's go to the next one. So Selznick and Kurtz talked back and forth, and finally they compromised because Selznick said, if we represented the home the way the home looked, people would think that we didn't do our homework, because people already have an image in their mind of what a southern plantation looks like from the big plantations in South Georgia. And we can't do that. So Kurtz said, let's do a compromise. Let's have the columns be square instead of round. And okay, they shook on that, and that's why the columns are square. I just want to talk about the Civil War Round Table, and I'll bring it to an end. Here's more work that Kurtz did. He did this while he was out in Hollywood. The complete geography of Tara, so that when background shots were shot, everything was completely coherent. Here's Atlanta in 1864, a typical bird's eye view that he was capable of doing. And a tribute was paid to him by Selznick in the coming attractions. At that time, there were coming attractions like we have today for movies. But Selznick had this album, and you would see the album, and pages would turn, and he took it done by Kurtz. He refused to let Vivian Leigh or Clark Gable be seen in the coming attractions. He wanted people to be sitting on the edge of their seat when the movie came out. And so this technique was used for the coming attractions in 1939, and for the second release in 1954, but after that it was put aside. Here we get to here is the Governor's Mansion painting that I told you about a little while ago. In the 40s, he worked, had commissions from the Atlanta Housing Authority and Coca-Cola. And here's a typical painting that was done for the Recreation Center at Capitol Homes. We see the locomotive on one side and the streamliner from the 40s on the other. And here are some of the paintings that have to do with Coca-Cola. Dr. Pemberton's house, where he invented the formula. Dr. Jacobs Pharmacy, and Coca-Cola is using this for is it their 125th anniversary that's coming up?
128.
And they're using it
use that a lot, that image.
As a publicity poster for their forthcoming campaign. This is the second. There's another Coca-Cola building, and yet one more I think I have here. And then I go to the last part of my talk. And Kurtz's wife passed away in 1946 at the young age of 62. And Kurtz married again, And his big job in the late 40s, he did a lot of historical work, working on the historical markers all over the state. And then he married Annie Pye in Warm Springs. He prepared Warm Springs to be a visitor's tourist destination. And now I finally get to the Civil War Roundtable of Atlanta. It was founded in 1949. He was one of the founders. The first one had been founded in Chicago in 1945. And also the Great Locomotive Chase was filmed in 1906. So here he was, 67 years old. And at this point, a new chapter was opened in his career, because when he came to Civil War Roundtable meetings, he met all these gentlemen from comfortable backgrounds who might have heard of him with relationship to Gone with the Wind, but now these people were able to say, can you paint this for me? Can you paint that for me? So there are hundreds and hundreds of paintings out there. We don't know how many paintings of the Great Locomotive Chase and of various scenes of the Civil War that he did at this time, and some of them are starting to come out of the woodwork. So I'll just show you a couple of those and finish up. Here's a famous painting based on diary entry by a Union general who complained on days when there was no fighting that his soldiers and the Union guys would get together on a Chattahoochee and exchange sugar and tobacco. So Kurtz based that on an entry in a Yankee general's diary. And a couple more, skirmish at Stone Mountain. Here's the general before it was kidnapped by Andrews and his raiders. We have another one. Here's the Texas going backward, facing the general. My next one is the DeKalb County Courthouse, the old one that burned down in 1898. And here's Kurtz in front of the general in his studio at home. And finally, the County Courthouse in Greencastle, where he grew up as a boy. And I end with a shot of a picture. He painted 5 of these versions of Tara, one for each of his children in the 1960s. And here's the ad for the exhibit that's going on at the Marietta Cobb Museum of Art. Thank you for your patience and for listening to me.